Hey everyone, it's me Wasabi and welcome back to another review. And today we have the Pulsar Pro Series Susanto-X. Now let me set the tone properly. This is a good mouse. Its build feels solid and the clicks feel very satisfying. And from my experience, it's been working perfectly fine. But what just doesn't feel right to me is the shape, and that doesn't necessarily mean that the shape is bad though. But anyway, let's look into it. So what's Pulsar selling here? First, you got the Pro Series collab mouse built around the Susanto brothers, whose names go by Excuriate and Forsaken. So the whole idea is their grip, their playstyle, their what feels right turned into a shape. The second thing is, like all Pulsar mice, this has the XS1 sensor. It's their flagship level tech, but basically it's a tuned Port 3950. The third thing is this mouse weighs 50 grams, and this is in the weight range that I am personally very comfortable with. And that's because this weight feels fast, but it still has enough body to feel solid and not twitchy. And the last highlight to mention is that this is designed for the relaxed claw and the claw grip style. Now here's a quick look at what you get inside the box. You get the mouse, of course, 8K pulling rate dongle, pink USB-C cable, a set of dot skates, a Pulsar sticker, a collector's card, a quick start guide, and that is pretty much all that's included inside the box. Now for the first impression, I love the 50-gram weight class. It does feel slightly heavier than the number because the mouse has some body to it, but it doesn't have that weight in the swing inertia, so it starts quick and stops clean. Now for the design, colorway wise, the black and pink contrast is actually really nice, but not gonna lie, I do not like the scroll wheel design. It makes the mouse look like something you buy from Toys R Us, and it clashes with how premium the rest of the mouse feels. Now about the build quality, this is where I'll give Pulsar big credit. This mouse feels dense in a good way. The body, the buttons, and even the scroll wheel assembly, everything feels thick, tight, and well fitted. And honestly, out of all the Pro Series mice that I've handled, like the 10s and the Zywo Chosen, this one is the most solid feeling build so far. And then the coating feels grippy enough in the hand, and because of the comfort grooves, the grip experience feels more confident too. For the start skates, it's pretty standard Pulsar stuff. Now, these are white basic PTFE skates, so you got a rather smooth and consistent experience, nothing out of the ordinary. And don't forget, you also get dot skates in the box if you want to change the glide experience later. Now before I get into the shape and how it feels from my experience, to put things into perspective, my hand size is 17.5 by 9. Shape-wise, this is a compact symmetrical mouse aimed at the relaxed claw and the claw grip style. And the first thing you'll notice is that the front half is very narrow and pretty straight. And you know, this sort of gives me the OP1 vibes, and normally this kind of narrow front feels very nimble for micro adjustments. And as you rest your hand along the back half doesn't feel like such a narrow mouse anymore. The rear and top feel more like a compact GPX style shape universal hump, and it feels the inside of my palm a lot more than I expected. So for me, this shape feels like a mashup of two designs that don't fully agree with each other. The front feels like it wants to be nimble, but the rear wants to be planted and supportive. But I gotta say that the mouse buttons are the highlights because the grooves remind me a lot of the Lemzoom Maya X. These feel very nice and they guide your fingers into the same spot every single time. But the weird part is, because the rear stays fuller and keeps in contact with the palm, it does feel like it can limit the freedom of movement you usually get from a narrow front. So at times when I'm trying to micro adjust, the back of the mouse can feel a little restrictive with my freedom of motion. It's not unusable, it's just a proportions thing. Sometimes it feels like the front is too narrow, or sometimes it feels like the back is too wide. And that is why something more balanced like the GPX Superlight 2C works so well. But if you ever wanted a small mouse that feels like it's got the GPX style rear support, OP1-ish narrow flat side feel, and Lemzoom Maya X button grooves, this basically feels like elements of all those three mice put together. Now here's a quick sound test to give you a better idea of how this mouse sounds. So this mouse has Pulsar optical switches, but the thing I actually like about it is that it's not light to press. This one feels more mid to heavy and it's got a nice firm tactility to it. And because the mouse body itself feels thick, you know, dense materials, tight fitments, the click feedback feels more solid under the finger. Even though this is the same switch type as the Pulsar 10's mouse, this one feels way nicer to click. The click experience feels thicker, more confident, and more deliberate. And the side buttons, they are surprisingly heavy to click. Heavy enough that I feel like I need to mention it. The upside is you're basically never pressing these by accident. And the feel of the side button clicks are super tactile and they are pretty loud. It has barely any pre-travel, barely any post-travel, and they feel tightly fitted into the shell, so each press feels pretty solid. For the scroll wheel, it feels borderline muddy. You can still feel the notches, but the tactile bump is really light. So instead of clean, defined steps, it's more like you're gliding through soft bumps. And you know, it's almost too easy to scroll. If there was any less resistance, I feel like you'd start getting accidental scroll inputs when you're trying to click down. The good news is that the middle click itself is still usable, it's just that the scroll tuning leans towards being lighter. Polling rates, you get pretty much what most mice can do today. So wireless polling rate up to 8000 Hz, and for wired, it's capped at 1000. Pulsar's XS1 sensor is fine for the most part, but it's not my first pick because there always seems to be something up with the sensor performance across different models. You may have seen some reports of sensors skipping and a floaty feeling that makes the mouse feel very slow. Those are things that I didn't experience with mine, so I might have just got lucky. Now about the software, this mouse uses Pulsar's Bibimbap web platform, so you do not need to download a desktop app. You basically got all the options you expect today, so remapping, DPI, polling rate, lift-off distance, motion sync. There is also turbo mode, and it's basically the same idea as competitive mode that you see on other mice. It's supposed to make the first movement feel more instant, but from my experience, for me, I didn't feel much difference. Maybe slightly more sensitive, but even I'm not sure, so I would not treat it as a must-use feature. I'd say leave it on or off depending on how much battery life you want to save. Now I gotta be honest, Pulsar's software UI across their products is kind of a mess. I really hope they settle on one consistent professional UI UX, because even if the hardware is legit, the software experience just doesn't feel top of the line esports, you know what I mean? And it honestly makes the whole thing feel a bit more cheaper than it should for the price that you're paying for. For tracking heavy games like the finals, this mouse feels stable and controlled. It doesn't feel too agile, this one feels more anchored. For flicking, especially in tactical FPS like Valorant, this is where the mouse feels much better because this style is more commit, stop, and reset. Where this mouse feels limiting for me is doing rapid flicks in a game like Overwatch 2. Because the hump is more centered and the sides are very flat, I get less natural indexing in the hand, so doing fast directional changes, it can feel like I'm managing the mouse instead of the shape guiding the motion. Micro adjusting with this mouse is pretty interesting. The front of it looks like it should be extremely nimble, and sometimes it does, but because the rear sits very snug in the palm during a relaxed claw grip, my micro freedom feels slightly reduced in quick correction moments. It's not bad, but it's something that I can notice when adjusting. Fatigue level for this one is pretty low, but depending on your hand size, of course. 50 grams is a very comfortable weight. It feels substantial but still light enough that long intense sessions don't feel taxing, and the shape in general is not very aggressive. It's got a pretty decent hum that gives a nice amount of comfort. Now this is a mouse that feels like it rewards stability first and agility second. It wants to feel planted and consistent in the back, whereas in the front it wants to be very nimble and agile. So this one is a little half and half. I'd say that if you prefer shapes that index hard and snap freely during rapid switching, this one might feel a little tighter than you like. But if you prefer something that is stable and stops clean, this one will feel pretty solid. So the verdict by me is that the Susanto-X is a well-built mouse, and with Pulsar's optical switches in the build, clicking feels very satisfying and the button grooves are honestly very nice. I love the weight, I love the size, but the shape feels like it needs more thought into the shape and the proportions. You know, just so that all segments of the mouse feel like they complement each other a little more. It could just be me because I reviewed so many mice before, but to me, when I first held this in my hand, the main body feels like it's a conflict between two designs. So I don't feel like this one is bad or you shouldn't buy it, but I am looking forward to see how a V2 version of this mouse would turn out. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video or found it helpful in any way, please leave a like and subscribe to support my channel, and I guess I'll see you in the next one.